Hi, I'm Peter Haddock and I'm here at the MachineMax headquarters for another edition of the podcast. And today I'm joined by a good friend of mine, Tommy from Plinx. And Tommy, we've met each other a number of times now to talk about connectivity and to talk about how we get the connected worksite into reality. Now, Tommy, you've been doing loads of different stuff at Plinx in order to do that. But tell us a little bit about the origins of Plinx before we talk about the construction industry you're now serving.
So Plinx has always been about protecting people in hazardous environments. So we initially started off in action sports, so surfing, mountain biking, skiing, as a way of protecting people and connecting people when they're in hazardous zones. And that's still something that we do very much today within the construction industry.
And I think what's really exciting for me is I've just been wearing one of your helmets with a team tag on it.
Yep.
But when I last saw you at one of the shows, we were talking about connected cones as well, people.
That's correct.
So obviously, you know, we're looking at devices now that can actually be fitted onto the structures around the actual industry. So we're talking about people, cones, infrastructure, fencing, whatever it may be that is a risk factor that needs to protect people on the job site. And also, we're here at MachineMax headquarters because you guys are connecting now into their system with the information. So when you're working with contractors that they're working with or plant hirers, that information that you're collecting can all feed into one central sort of database and dashboard. But tell me, how are you getting it all to work? Because the other thing you do is the private network for job sites, and often job sites are in brownfield areas, but often they're also in greenfield areas where the signal is terrible.
Yeah, so or city centres for that matter, like here.
And I think what's really important about that is that we can't have a connected worksite if we can't connect devices, can we?
Absolutely. So you're quite right. We're connecting more and more assets, more and more things that are important to us. We've been talking previously about the importance of understanding how a construction site works, the interactions between the various different assets, various different important parts of our sites. And we do have a sensor that connects to a helmet, sensors that connect to machines, sensors that connect to places, and others that are in the pipeline. And it's important that you're using that information in a timely manner, because that's when it gives you the insight to be able to make better decisions. So connectivity is the core of that. We aggregate data from multiple sensors, we connect it through our private networks that can, as you say, be deployed in a remote area where there's no public connectivity, or in a city or in a tunnel. We pretty much can provide connectivity in any space. We take that information from the sensors, we route it through the network, and then we surface it to our platform. In this case, we're really, really proud to be working alongside MachineMax, where we're going to be visualizing all of the information from our sensors in their platform alongside other sensor data that they're taking from other sources. So it's a really exciting change in the way that we work with our customers to show them that by pulling together multiple solutions into one offering, they can really leverage that extra value from the combination of solutions.
I think what's really interesting for me though, Tommy, is everything starts about how you connect things together. You're talking about a private network.
Yeah.
For people listening to this podcast, they might not even know what a private network is and how it comes together. Tell me a little bit about that element and how you can get the level of connectivity, 5G ultimately, that we would want within a job site.
So, comparing what we currently do to public networks, for example, within a public network, you're bound by the constraints of the network provider. And typically they're putting networks out that cover the majority of population density. That's what they're looking for. So remote areas or areas that are difficult to cover, where there aren't a lot of people, typically don't receive any network coverage. Networks can also move coverage around on the fly based on demand, so they can beam steer a signal, so that one minute you've got a network, the next minute you don't. And for a construction project, that's a real problem, because if you are running mission critical systems that need connectivity, and all of a sudden someone decides they're going to turn it off, or you're sharing it we've spoken about on a number of occasions about the highways example where you're doing some road maintenance and all of a sudden there's a traffic jam, probably maybe as a result of the work we're doing. And all of a sudden everyone's on Instagram and Facebook and they're YouTube watching fantastic Peter Haddock videos. and because of that, you're sharing your bandwidth that you're powering your machines or your iPads with, where you're using your product management tools. You're sharing that with the people that are driving past. So all of a sudden, your network operation may be hampered by the things that are going on around you. A private network is very different. A private network is something that you deploy based on your needs of your site, so the area that you're looking to cover. And it also means that you can protect your bandwidth. So it means that, I know I've got 200 machines and 1,500 people. Well, okay, I know what, based on the area that I'm laying out, I know what I need in terms of bandwidth, in terms of connectivity, and therefore you will always get the service level that you're requiring. We deploy networks that just take sensor data, so location, status, that kind of thing. But this year, later on, there'll be a big announcement about our private 5G networks, which we spoke about last year at FutureWorks, but we will be launching officially later on this year, which do exactly the same. They deploy private 5G networks across sites, and they're flexible, so you can move them around as the site develops. You can make sure you've got coverage, you can make sure you've got the bandwidth. But what we're offering with 5G over our current offering is the ability for third-party equipment to connect. So your smartphones, your iPads, your drones, your surveying equipment, your autonomous machines, whatever it is, can connect to this network and provide a level of with a level of service that you would expect from a mission-critical type system.
And of course, Tommy, what you've said there, what's really important and significant is a construction site changes as time goes on.
Correct. Yeah.
So when you've got connectivity at the start of a project and you move down the line, say we're doing highways maintenance work, you're moving down the line, putting that network in so that you can move with it allows you to have the fundamental connectivity that you need. And when you're managing that process, one of the first things that you need to do in any job site now is actually put in your construction infrastructure.
Right.
And the 5G needs to go in before even a shovel hits the ground or a machine arrives, because that way you're going from day one to have all of the things that you need to create the site, but also manage it as it builds up, as it mobilises, and actually as it demobilises as well. How do you work that? How do you use different sensors, repeaters, whatever it may be, to actually enable that to happen so it's not something that's physically difficult to manage?
So you're right, construction sites do evolve really rapidly. Things like even stockpiles, for example, can make a huge difference to coverage, because you're fairly limited to what you can actually deploy in terms of permanent infrastructure. So you're limited to the sort of height you can get an antenna, for example. But you're also limited to the impact you have on other people around you, your neighbours, the wildlife, that kind of thing. And also, to a degree, there aren't many projects where you've got the luxury of all the space you would ever need. So 1 minute it's a stockpile, the next minute it's a pile-in mat, or it's a machine storage area that's constantly evolving. So it's really difficult to pin down where your infrastructure should go at the start so that it is still in that same place when you're demobilising. So one of the advantages we've got with both our current technology and the 5G technologies is the luxury of power. So compared with a private Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi type network where you'd have to have repeaters all the way down a project, we can actually broadcast over quite significant distances. And because of that, you've got the flexibility to be able to move. And we've got mapping tools that we can use to run an analysis on a 3D point cloud, for example, so you can understand, okay, if I do a survey today, if I position the mast here or here, how's that going to affect our coverage? So it's really about being as frictionless as possible when it comes to deploying a network that does ultimately what you need and provide coverage across your project. But it's a very good point, yeah.
And I think where really interesting about that is you're creating now 3D models, and we're doing digital simulations of actual big projects where we're saying before anything gets onto the project, we're simulating how machines are going to do the digging or the dozing, how the actual project's going to site its welfare units and its stockpiles, like you said there. And through that digital model at the start of the project, if people bring you in early doors, you've actually got that model to model on top of.
Absolutely, absolutely.
The connectivity space.
Yeah, and there's another bit to it as well, which is it's where our business is evolving to be, is this feedback loop. So essentially, if you consider taking all the information from your site that you get from your machines and from your people and from your assets, logistics information, weather information, and you start feeding that back into that 3D model, then all of a sudden you can learn from what you did before. And that could impact the later stages of the project that you're working on right now, but the critical thing is that it impacts future projects. So the next project you roll out on, we're not making the same old mistakes. Yeah. And that's really where, as an industry, we need to be driving more continuous improvement type methodologies.
Yeah, and I've been talking to the team on the A12 recently, and I'm going to step back before I talk about that, but the A14 was one of those integrated projects which actually was delivered before time and under budget because of the sharing of information. The learning that's come from that, because it was the first real big project to really drill down with machine control from the likes of Leica Geosystems, is the fact that learning is now jumping over to other national highways projects and being shared by the CAP community into places like HS2 and beyond. Yeah. But with the A12, what we're able to do is really take the concept of what you're talking about, work on it now, and actually create a model for how we can deliver the 3D model that is going to be behind that. Yeah. Why is it that important right now that we're working sort of like 12 months ahead on the systems and the processes that are going to be utilised on that project?
I think historically, and maybe most projects today, HS2 is a slight anomaly in the fact that they're really pushing forwards to be better. But I think most projects, information is siloed. You see it's designed for purpose and it's used for that purpose, and it's spanning across to other functions of the business we don't see very often. I think projects like the A12 have got a really, really proactive view on breaking those silos and really utilising all the information that we have as the project goes on, but really putting some thought into it at the start as to how we can continually improve. Right from the 3D model, like you say, down through any time that work is split between subcontractors, the sharing of that information, empowering subcontractors to do better, looking at autonomy, looking at how information can move around the project better with iPads. Sounds like a trivial thing, huge transformative thing if you can get that right with software like Afex. They're doing it right. Looking ahead, starting 12 months ahead. Let's see it in reality.
And I think what's equally important for me is how we look at projects moving forward when we say what is happening right now, right here on the job site. Mm-hmm. Everybody's got a job to do. It's going to start with safety first. We've got to have sites that are designed that they can be built in the best, most efficient, most productive way possible. Yeah. But we have to understand that that's got to be built safely. Yeah. When we are on a big site, a lineal site like HS2, where you've got a lot of space on sites like that. So, you can take that people-plant interface away. But however, we're in the city centre of London today, when you are working on projects where there's a lot of people around, where there's a lot of vehicles around, where there's people not paying attention and things like that, you've got that element that says, how are we going to ensure that what we do now, and if it's going wrong, i.e. there's too much interference with the general public onto that job site, how can we stop it before something bad happens?
I think everyone's quick to jump on the proximity problem, I think that the more information we capture now about how people, machines, various different assets interact with each other highlights improvements in phasing going forwards, for example. So say, for example, you're in a really compact site, it's like one of those jigsaw puzzles where you have to move the various different squares around to get the picture. It's like that in some city centre environments. We've worked on a number of projects like that. And I think that, the blame is always on we haven't got enough space or we haven't, but actually, going back to your point about 3D models and planning and working through the phases, I think if we understand more about how to design a site for the best phasing possible and how can we design out risk by thinking about what we need in terms of space and just-in-time deliveries, we're talking logistics here. Really. How we can get all that right so that there aren't any alerts from a machine operator, because no one need be in the zone that he is operating within, and people needn't stray off the safe traffic route, because why would they? It's the path of least resistance. They're moving around site as they should. So, we're doing a lot of work with HC at the moment. We're on their regulatory sandbox on looking at flows of energy and how to best optimise work sites based upon data that we're capturing. So, I really think the importance of this feedback loop, the importance of thinking about how to do better next time is really important. And I think that comes from connectivity, not necessarily connectivity of sensors, although that is an important part, but connectivity of these siloed data sets and really providing as much information to planners, designers, specifiers as we can.
And I think when you actually look at the way in which certain things happen outside in this world that we're in, we have a very seasonal UK environment that changes quite dramatically, and we can see how that impacts the way in which we can deliver projects. But equally, we can see that things happen. So, for example, the use of these sort of connected sensors as we build infrastructure, like a road, for example, is really important, because we might have a certain element of that road next to a load of trees that shed their leaves at certain times and that actually, then block up the drains. And the limited amount of resources that we have within the maintenance environment allows us to pinpoint where we should be doing that planned maintenance, and also look at the scenarios, like you said, that has been happening at that time. So if the leaves are falling early, if the leaves are falling late, that information and that practicalness that we can have on site allows us to make those decisions where to employ people to do that work and what the timing is. Equally, we have the big issue quite rightly right now about what do we do with potholes and maintenance and things like that. So it is all about collecting this data, but it's all about how I think we can manage it both in a data sets, but a data insights and visualization.
Correct, yeah.
And so when you're looking at the drone surveys, when you're looking at pictures of a certain area or whatever, and how we piece that all together, and that's fundamentally location based, and that's critical when it comes to having that connectivity and that sort of private network that allows us to feed all that data in and then collate it in a way that has its own little geofence, for example.
I think I was having a conversation with a client earlier about how construction should probably be a bit more like manufacturing.
Yeah.
Manufacturing's different, isn't it? Because you're inside, so you're not really affected by the weather, and you're making the same thing over and over again. In construction, you're not making the same thing over and over again. In fact, very rarely you're making the same thing over and over again, and you're doing it outside where the weather could be terrible and you might have to stop work. The ground may be unstable or maybe unsafe. But if you were given the parameters, if you were given the insight to say, okay, there's a bit of thinking about how we standardise design, and the modular bridge stuff that Langer Rourke is doing is really great stuff and real good step in the right direction, and hopefully we can do that more with other assets and start to move that forward. But if we can also think about how, once we've got that design to be as standardised as possible, how can we also consider the other environmental impacts, like you said, the leaves on the trees is a good one. I mean, I don't know how you do that, but you can see how the flooding element may be relative, or you may even think about other environmental factors and how that's linked. But in order to have that insight, and in order for someone to really understand the root cause of why something happened, and really build that into the plan, the budget, the risk profile of the project, that's critical to us being more like manufacturing and being closer to hitting projects on time and on budget.
So let's talk a little bit about risk, because risk is basically where the profits are made and lost.
Yeah.
And managing risk is critical from the health and safety perspective, but also from a business continuity and sustainability perspective. We risk doing things the same over and over again and not embracing technology because we are scared of it.
Yeah, maybe.
And some of us think, well, how on earth are we going to get all this data together, and how on earth are we going to make it relevant to me over here as an operator, to somebody else here in the office that's doing a sustainability role, to the project manager, etc., etc. But equally, that silo mentality and the lack of sharing of information stops us getting to the next level.
100%.
And this kind of comes onto the conversation about why we're here in the MachineMax headquarters today, because you've recognised that as a data collector, you are quite good at doing all the people stuff. You've got the connected cones and the other bits and bobs, and you've actually got the network that helps gather information and 3D machine control. Machines can actually use that to upload as-built data and to download new models and things like that. All of that stuff's great. But how do we put it all together in an easy to understand format that is now and is sending us alerts that something needs to be done now, but is also historically later telling us, here's the good stuff and here's the mistakes with it?
So I think it comes down to unification of the information. So like you say, we've got sensors, other people have got sensors,
Yep.
MachineMax have got their own sensor. We're understanding how they should be used in collaboration with each other or as alternatives for one another. And there are a whole host of different other sensors you can use, or cameras. Camera is a sensor ultimately. But the unification, the bringing together of all that information in one place is where that extra piece gets won. It's understanding that the reason why this happened was because the weather was bad, or it was understanding the reason why that machine was inactive because people were moving around that zone, or it was understanding that that machine wasn't able to operate in that, to do that task during the hours of 7 and 9 because of an environmental challenge or whatever. And it's bringing all that together in one place so that it's easily understood. And what MachineMax do really well is that the way that they visualize this information is really clear and easy to understand. And so what we've together identified is that if you can utilize Plinx data within MachineMax, and there will be others, and there is other platforms that are different to MachineMax. Sensat is another great platform that you can utilize. You can see assets in 3D models and that kind of thing. Google Earth on steroids.
Yep.
It's another great platform where this information should be visualized. And normally these are different stakeholders, different people that are utilizing these different platforms. And I think it's really important that as an industry we get together and we accept that there are different companies doing different things, and we work together to provide these streams of information and the ways in which it can be presented, so that ultimately the customer gets what they want, which is knowledge is power.
Yep.
Knowledge is, I can do this better next time, cheaper. I can get it safer, more environmentally friendly. So unification, knowledge is power. That's my takeaway.
And for me, what we've also got to do is we've also got to realise that there's a lot of opportunity for us to change the structure in way construction works, because we've got the ability to do off-site fabrication, we've got the ability in the future to do autonomy, to do remote control, to do all these things that come to life when you've got connectivity. and we've got the opportunity to say, take an operator that may have had an injury into a CAT command station that can still have their skills delivered, onto a job site. But the other thing is, and what really excites me, is we've got an opportunity to show the world that construction is an exciting place. It's a connected environment. Things are happening. We're building stuff. Without us, you wouldn't have your computers, your computer games. You wouldn't have a factory. You wouldn't have the power lines. You wouldn't have anything that goes with it. But we need to do this. We need to talk about this more to attract the talent that we need to look at these sort of data insights, to send them in the right direction, to have the user experience I've been talking about earlier today. When do you think that's coming? Or do you think we are too far away from that still? Or do you think that we can accelerate through with all the stuff that's happening right now?
I think we're on the cusp of it, to be honest, Peter. I think, if you look at what's going on in the world with autonomy, teleoperation, like you say, but autonomy is similar because, that autonomy is just one, an autonomous operation is just one part of what needs to be done. Someone still needs to manage that machine, especially, when the majority of the environments that we put an autonomous machine aren't quite ready yet, but, we're getting there. So, and I think it's already an exciting, flying drones, autonomous machines, some of the surveying technologies, some of the augmented reality. It's incredible what is out there, and the younger generations, they are armed with this skill set that is right for taking this on. So I don't think we're that far off at all. I think what it's going to take is the industry ambassadors for technology in those tier ones and maybe the lower tiers, really putting themselves forward and saying, it's coming. We're not scared of it. We need to embrace it. We need, even AI. We've got to embrace it. We've got to use it as an industry, and we've got to show that we're gonna be better as a result of it. So I put that to the industry leaders to say, how are we going to prove to the next generations that we're going to do a better job of it?
So, Tommy, we talked about all of this, but I want really a final thought from you to close off this podcast around why, and why is it important that we do these things and the sensors, and what does it actually mean, rather than what people's perceptions are?
Yeah, so the big picture is that we need to learn more about what's happening on our sites, and it matters to everyone that turns up. It matters to the guys on the ground that have got muddy boots. It matters to the management that are trying to understand why something's going wrong. It matters to the project directors that are bidding for work and that are looking to optimise their operations because that's what they're targeted on. And so we really need to change our mentality a little bit, thinking about what this information can do for us as an industry and how it can move us forwards on that continual improvement journey. And once we get past that, the roadblock of data and privacy, because I really don't believe that privacy is a problem, because I think we for example have systems that protect the privacy of the people wearing the sensors. If you can get beyond that, because we've done the work to do it, then all of a sudden, actually, it's an enabler. It's an enabler to do better. It's an enabler to not have to walk as far around a pedestrian route. It's an enabler not to have to be put into a hazardous environment. Let's be open-minded about where connectivity and sensors can take us. But the future's bright. If we consider what tools we've got in our arsenal to really make a change.
And it's change that happens, folks, when we do things differently, but also when we talk together and connecting together as human beings. Absolutely. To talk these things through, like we've done today from the MachineMax podcast, is so important. And one of the things I'd like to end with is, we are seeing a change. Yeah. It is there. It's there, and it's being developed, all this technology for the better good of not just the people involved in the construction, but the whole of the global workforce and also the globe itself as we reduce emissions, do things better and keep everyone safe. Great to see you again, Tommy.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Thanks, Peter.